Rest is this profound concept in Hebrew literature. It's what God does and what God commands. So maybe it does have more to do with power than you'd think. So as we set out on this summer series, Inside Out, we hold on to the literal and metaphorical meaning of the word home. The poet and philosopher John O'Donohue said that home is a subtle, implicit laboratory of spirit. And I take that to mean that who we are in the world begins with who we are at home, both in our houses and apartments, but also in the spaces where we feel most at home, including our aspiration to feel at home in our bodies. So today, we'll begin with Jesus's invitation to rest in Matthew 11 and 12, and we'll explore a riff on wisdom, the work of rest, Sabbath, and shalom, and bodies. So in Matthew 11, Jesus has just finished calling out these unrepentant cities, as you do. And that sounds harsh, but it's more like, woe to you, city, if you can't see the good in all its glory when it's right there in your midst. He means himself. Then Jesus drops into a prayer where he says that he and the Father are inseparable. All things are handed over to him by God. And he says he reveals the divine. Then Jesus lifts his head as his amen scans the crowd and says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, here's the thing about the people Jesus is talking to. Everyone is weary and burdened. These aren't middle-class people. Most people in Jesus' day were poor and subsistent and illiterate. So let's assume he's speaking to everybody. And what does he say he'll give them? Rest. Why rest? Why not money? Why not privilege and power? Well, frankly, he doesn't have those things, not as we'd measure them. Rest is this profound concept in Hebrew literature. It's what God does and what God commands. So maybe it does have more to do with power than you'd think. You see, right here in this section of Matthew's gospel, Jesus is under attack for how he teaches about faith. He's not like the other religious teachers. He's not like the Pharisees and the scribes. Pharisees and scribes were honestly kind of religious snobs. They demand perfection. And later in Matthew, Jesus calls them out for tying heavy burdens on people's shoulders, burdens too heavy to carry. So Jesus challenges devotion. Rules won't get you what you want, but maybe rest will. Something that's easy to miss in Jesus' words about rest is that Jesus is speaking from the perspective of the wisdom tradition. And that's lady wisdom to you. Wisdom is personified in Scripture as a godly woman who calls out in the street to everyone who hears her. She gives solid life advice, which you'll find in books like Proverbs. And she understands creation because, get this, she was right there with God at the beginning of it all. Proverbs 8. One of my favorite things in the Bible is when these two motifs, the wise woman and the beloved son, come together as one. Jesus isn't afraid to be, I'm going to say it, girly. Womanhood is not pejorative to him, it's wisdom. So back to rest. The gospel writer seems to riff on a wisdom text from the wise sayings of Sirach, compiled 2 centuries before Jesus. And you can find Sirach in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles. Here's a taste, and I invite you to listen for how much it sounds like Jesus. Draw near to me, you who are uneducated, and lodge in the house of instruction. Why do you say you are lacking in these things? And why do you endure such great thirst? I opened my mouth and said, acquire wisdom for yourselves without money. Put your neck under her yoke, and let your souls receive instruction. It is to be found close by. So Sirach names this yoke. And Jesus seems to borrow both the image and the idea, but what are they both talking about? Maybe you've heard that yoke is about oxen, and that's true. A yoke distributes the weight of the work across the 2 animals. The New Testament epistles refer to this kind of yoke to speak about 2 people yoked or bound together. But yokes also get put on human bodies. A person out doing work in the field would put a yoke across not one, but both shoulders to distribute the weight across the body. But let me tell you, that's not a yoke that you're keen to put on. That's a yoke you cannot wait to take off. Finally, yoke means something more than field work in the rabbinic tradition. It's about learning and instruction to help with life's heavy burdens. It's not that you won't carry burdens, feel the weight of them in body and spirit, but wisdom lightens the load. So Jesus isn't saying, come to me and be my co-oxen in the field. He's not even saying, come be my servant as you toil for the Lord. He's saying, I have a whole new way to learn about how to be human. Your emperors and governors, they keep you down. Your religious leaders make your life so tedious, but he says, I am gentle. I understand what makes life hard for you. And I am not trying to add to that. I'm the God of the blessed be. Blessed be the poor. Blessed be the peacemakers. Blessed be the hungry. So learn my way. I bring lightness to all that you carry, everything that drags you down. And when you follow me, you will find rest for your soul. And the Greek word for soul here is suke or psyche, and it means your true being, your whole life. Now, I get that sounds abstract. I mean, how does Jesus lighten the load of, say, your family dealing with a new diagnosis? Or a job that you used to love that has soured for you, or the stress of trying to hold your attention to something that you actually care about rather than what the algorithms feed you. I mean, how many times do I have to tell Facebook that I don't care about celebrity gossip? Show me less of this, Facebook. I care about my friends. But it doesn't matter because I am drowning in celebrity gossip. Go ahead, ask me about J-Lo and Ben. I know too much. I don't want to care. But you know what? In a funny way, Jesus is telling the Pharisees something similar. People don't care about what you think they care about. They want food when they're hungry. Leaders who look out for them, and truth that opens life and doesn't shut it down. So Jesus and his disciples, they take a walk and they grab a snack and they get into an argument. I kind of like all 3 of these things. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Jesus' word about rest in chapter 11 and the story in chapter 12 are linked with the phrase "at that time" to show that these pieces belong together, even though we see separate chapters. And so Jesus walks through a field on the Sabbath, and his disciples get hungry. They pull off heads of grain and they munch on them. And the Pharisees see this and they say to Jesus, "Your disciples are breaking the rules of the Sabbath." And Jesus goes, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read in the law that the priests on Sabbath duty in the temple desecrate the Sabbath and yet are innocent?" Now, harvesting a snack with your hands when you're hungry is not against the law here, even when it's not your field. Just don't get out your sickle and take more than you need in that moment. And the religious leaders are trying to catch Jesus on a technicality about the Sabbath. Can you harvest even a little bit on the Lord's day of rest? After all, Exodus 34 says, 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. Even in plowing time and in harvest time, you shall rest. So really, Jesus? Are you really teaching people that what they're doing is okay? 100%. Yes, he is. Jesus says to the Pharisees, David, you remember him, right? He walked his men right into the tabernacle and they ate the consecrated bread meant for priests, and David is innocent. And you've heard of priests, right? They work all day long on the Sabbath because rituals take work. Priests light fires and slaughter animals and lift them up on the altar. And all of that should be against the law, but it isn't. Is it? So Jesus' arguments are sturdy. He goes to the scriptures, which they all agree are the authority, and he tracks down David, and he references priests, but he offers a new interpretation, and that always gets our boy Jesus into trouble. When Jesus says, "What David did, I can do," he's saying he's the new David, the one that hungry people are waiting for. And this world you're trying to protect, this world of rules and temples and burdens too heavy to carry, look around you. You want to know where the temple is? The structure meant to outline God's presence here on earth, our very own Garden of Eden? It's right here. And I imagine as he says this, Jesus' hands brush across the bristle tops of the grain as the whole golden field waves in the wind. What's practical here is that work and rest aren't opposites. They're partners. They're co-creators. And you and your wisdom determine what's needed for your work and rest in your context. I really think that Jesus trusts you to determine that. You know when your work is as rest to you. And you know when it has just crept in too far, and you know when it's time to stop. So Jesus says, something greater than the temple is here. And the writer is saying that Jesus fulfills everything the tradition establishes. David, priests, the temple, every sacred ritual. And Jesus can therefore talk to us about the Sabbath So Jesus quotes the prophet Hosea to get at the heart of Sabbath. It's mercy, not sacrifice. It's being for the innocent and not against them. Then Jesus says, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. The Sabbath isn't over. Jesus didn't cancel it. The point is to remember what Sabbath is for. Sabbath is about our relationship to time. It goes all the way back to creation. In the creation poem, God makes the world in 6 counted days, and then on the 7th, God rests. In Exodus liberation, God's people are delivered from slavery and told rest to remember that your oppressor does not own your body or your time. And in the prophetic tradition, you live Sabbath by loving mercy, not sacrifice, care for others, even enemies, matters most. Jesus doesn't break the Sabbath or cancel rest. He fills it right up with a divine energy that both settles and propels. Rest leads to shalom, peace that points to wholeness in the widest possible sense. When you step into Sabbath, you take off the garb of your work and say, even without all that I produce in my job, even without the roles that define my days, even without the reputation I have built up for years, I am enough. And I can rest in God. Here's the deal with rest. Rest is a state and it's a practice. It is a noun and it is a verb. I used to think I was a bad Christian when it came to rest. I have friends who practice Sabbath strictly. They have a day a week for rest, digital detoxing, and spiritual rejuvenation. They've claimed for years something that is absolutely true. If you have a regular rhythm of rest, you will get more work done when you're working. It's been studied and it's true. But we don't rest so we can work harder. We rest to keep our work in check. My practice of Sabbath, of rest, is so much more basic. It is very simple. I prioritize sleep. I make sure I've always got a novel on the go. It is so good for my mind. I stretch in the quiet of the morning before I start the day. I wash my face and let my mind wander while I floss my teeth at night. I make sure that when my brother or my sister or my nieces or my nephews call, I always have the space to take their call, always. And I stare out the window a lot. I mean, a lot. I don't nap. I don't take a strict Sabbath. I often work on my day off, and I don't think any of that matters very much. What does matter, what really matters, is that I piece my life together. I hold myself together with Sabbath and shalom, rest and peace wherever I can find them. And what following Jesus shows us is that rest and peace, Sabbath and shalom are not under lock and key. They require no incantation, no strict set of rules, unless, of course, rules bring you life. The Sabbath is set free so that you can put yourself back together after a long day or a dry season or a knockdown struggle. In our rest, we heal. Minds, spirits, and bodies heal. Tricia Hersey, the founder of the NAP ministry, which is a real thing, says that rest is resistance. Rest disrupts and pushes back forces that wear down bodies. Hersey says capitalism and white supremacy are toxic systems that refuse to see the inherent divinity in human beings and have used bodies as tools for production and destruction. Hersey urges us to see our bodies as a miracle and a place of reverence where existing in exhaustion is not normal or acceptable. In other words, you don't earn rest. Rest is naturally what you need. So, where are you at with rest right now? Are you getting enough? By the way, I see you, parents. I get it. What's in your way? Is what you ask of others interfering in their rest? And what small pauses are restful to you? As ordinary as they are, can you shift to see a pause as something sacred?
Hey, Jeremy here, and thank you for clicking through to watch that video. If you're intrigued by the work that we're doing here at Commons, you can, of course, hit subscribe to keep up to date with all of the content that we're posting here on YouTube. You can head to our website at commons.church, and you can find us on all of the socials at Commons Church. You can also join our Discord. There, the community is having all kinds of conversations about how we can encourage each other in the way of Jesus. Head to commons.church/Discord for the invite there. Also, leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you and all the ways that you are journeying on this path toward Jesus. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the ways that you contribute to this conversation. Together, we'll see you soon.